Let's open with the word of prayer. We thank you, Father, for this place. We thank you for bringing us here to worship, to honor and adore you and Christ. We ask that you would bless our time here. May it be a sweet and a dear time spent with you. Amen. Growing up, there was an extensive record collection in our house, ranging from gospel to country and western to pop, instrumental. I was able, at a very young age, to listen to music. We had one of the old stereo players that you actually put this real thin thing on, spindle, and it went around. You kind of put the needle over on it, and whoa, sound came out of it. Foreign concept today. But I grew up loving music. I was all the time listening to the radio. In the early 70s, when I became a believer, 1971, I got my first guitar. It was an associate pastor in our church, Larry Curley, who really helped me with music. I had an English teacher in the 11th grade, Margaret Stocks. I am forever indebted to her. She got me interested in the written word. But when I went to Auburn, came across this little book, Art in the Bible. Very, very influential book on my life. Last week we looked at the first essay, Art in the Bible. I hope you take the time to go back and look at the passages that Dr. Schaeffer mentions. Study them. There is great art in the Bible. Today I would like for us to very quickly skim this second essay called Some Perspectives on Art. He lists 11 perspectives for us. We do not have near enough time to even cover one, much less 11, so I will literally fly through these 11 perspectives. And I would like to share some things from my life and my love of art. Perspective number one. A work of art has a value in itself. What Schaeffer is saying is, it is a created thing, and it's meant to be enjoyed. We don't just have art for the sake of art. We have art to enjoy it and to learn from it. Number two, art forms, whether it's painting, poetry, music, sculpture, whatever, art forms add strength to the worldview which shows through no matter what the worldview is or whether the worldview is true or false. Worldview is literally how you see the world. Number three, in all forms of writing, both poetry and prose, it makes a tremendous difference whether there is a continuity or a discontinuity with the normal definitions of words in normal syntax. In other words, a dictionary, grammar. You can, and a lot of contemporary poets have experimented with this, but you can use words that don't necessarily mean what you want them to say, and you can put them in a particular order that don't necessarily make much sense. And it's okay. No, it's not. It's just stupid. but yet people do it. Will it last? No. Most of it has disappeared today. It just doesn't make much sense. But syntax is sentence structure, word order. Number 4, the fact that something is a work of art does not make it sacred. Art is not sacred. It is not. There are people that make it sacred. They worship it. They place more value on it than it actually contains. Number 5, what kind of judgment does one apply then to a work of art? Schaeffer says, I believe that there are 4 basic standards. Number 1, technical excellence. How good is the person creating this art? Janie and I have discussed many times, mostly with painting, the technical skills that people have. And you have artists who just have unbelievable technical skills, but I may not like their artwork. It may not say much. You have artists who have excellent technical skills, maybe not as good as this particular person, but their art is ageless. So you have to have technical excellence. But just because you have technical excellence, that does not make you a great artist. It does not. You can sit at this piano and you can master scales and arpeggios. But if you don't grasp, if you do not grasp what's between the notes on a piece of music, you're not going to amount to anything. You're really not. Validity. Is the artist honest, or is he just in this for making money? We know artists that are in it just for making money. Poor Van Gogh. Made nothing. Number 3, intellectual content, the worldview which comes through. What is this piece of art saying? What is the worldview of the artist? How does the artist see the world around him? Number 4, the integration of content and vehicle. Is the artist taking the subject matter here and the means that he has chosen to express this subject matter? Are they integrated together? Does it work? Does this piece of art actually work? Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Number 6, art forms can be used for any type of message, from pure fantasy to detailed history. You can be factual with it. You can be fictitious with it. We need to understand what is going on here. I've always had somewhat of an issue with what's called historical fiction. Can history actually be fictitious? Can fiction actually be historical? I don't have a problem reading some of it, as long as I kind of know what's true and what's not. One of Lydia's favorite books, and I have come to love it too, Travel. And it's the story of the Civil War told through the eyes of Robert E. Lee's horse. Now, there are parts of fiction in it, but it's a beautiful, masterful story. If you know the history of the Civil War and you read this book, then you kind of have an idea as to the historical aspect of it. But we need to be careful with mixing and mingling things. We need to know if it's fantasy, if it's history, if they're kind of mingling together. Number 7, styles of art form change, and there's nothing wrong with this. Poetry has changed a lot since the time of William Shakespeare. Has it changed for the better? Yes. But Shakespeare is still, and will be for centuries, one of the masters of English poetry. But it has changed. And there's not anything wrong with change when it comes to styles of art form. Number 8, there is no such thing as a godly style or an ungodly style. You do have moral and immoral. You can take the sweetest, most beautiful piece of music, add some vulgar lyrics to it, and it's changed. But there is no such thing as a godly style or an ungodly style. And what we have to do is we have to filter these things through our worldview, which is this. This defines the worldview of the Christian, the Scriptures. This is it. Nothing else. It all flows from this book right here. Number 9, the Christian worldview can be divided into what I call a major and a minor theme. The minor theme, we are fallen creatures. We sin every day, multiple times. We have revolted against God. We're defeated. We live in sin. It's the minor theme. The major theme, life has meaning and life has purpose through Christ. And because of this major theme, we are forgiven of the minor theme. Our worldview. Number 10, Christian art is by no means always religious art. That is, art which deals with religious themes. And we looked at this a little bit last week. Not everything in the temple had religious implications, so to speak. There's nothing inherently religious about a pomegranate. But God put pomegranates on those garments as a thing of beauty and a thing of delight. Christian art is by no means always religious art. That is, art which deals with religious themes. Schaeffer says, Christian art is the expression of the whole life of the whole person who is a Christian. What a Christian portrays in his art is the totality of life. The totality of life. And that's what allows an artist to paint sunflowers, paint a landscape, paint a portrait. Those things are not, quote, religious, unquote, but we do paint them. We do write poetry about them. We do sing about them. Art is not to be solely a vehicle for some sort of self-conscious evangelism. Number 11, every artist has the problem of making an individual work of art and as well building up a total body of work. An example he uses here, Pastor Little. If Pastor Little felt like he had to put everything into one sermon, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. Pastor Little stands in this pulpit 2-3 times a week, every month, every year, year after year after year, and he preaches to us the gospel. Micah stands in this pulpit too. Brother David stood in this pulpit too. They preach to us the word week after week after week. Why do you have expository preaching? You want to preach the book of John? You can't do it in one sermon. You can hit the main themes. And what Schaeffer is saying here, when you look at the work of an artist, you don't look at just one work of art. You have to look at their whole body of work. You want to study the music of Beethoven? There's some great pieces you can start with, but he wrote dozens and dozens of pieces of music. To judge Beethoven based on this particular work, you miss out on all of these other works that he created. So you have to look at the total body of the artist's output. You can't just confine it to one. And he concludes art in the Bible, and I will read this. I think it's superb. No work of art is more important than the Christian's own life. No work of art is more important than the Christian's own life. And every Christian is called upon to be an artist in this sense. As we live, as we breathe, as we walk from day to day throughout this world, are we working on our piece of art? Are we actually spending time working on my life as a piece of art? He may have no gift of writing, no gift of composing or singing, but each man has the gift of creativity. This is so important. Each man has the gift of creativity in terms of the way he lives his life. In this sense, the Christian's life is to be an artwork. The Christian's life is to be a thing of truth and also a thing of beauty in the midst of a lost and despairing world. And in this lost and despairing world, when people see me, are they seeing a work of art? When they look at you, are they seeing a work of art? Is my life, is your life a work of art? So when I got to Auburn and I read this book, great impact on me. I had loved music, lyrics, poetry. But when I read this book, it was like a consuming fire. I had to know more. I had to experience more. A lot of my classes at Auburn, my electives, took a lot of music, poetry. I wanted to know more. I wanted to study more. Why? Because I felt like it was very important. We have been given great gifts by our Father in heaven. One of those gifts is the ability to create. We cannot create like God. God had the creative ability to speak things into existence. We can't do that. We're not God. But yet God has given us as humanity the ability to create, whether it's through painting, music, writing, whatever. We do have that gift. So I married an art major. We met at Auburn. I would go with Janie to some of her art classes in Biggin Hall, and you just smell the paint and the turpentine, and it became somewhat intoxicating because here in this building there was art. I was in the concert choir at Auburn. Dr. Thomas Smith. Unbelievable experience. One of the great experiences of my life. But from then on, my life has been basically about art. Whether it's spending years and years and then a few more years in music stores trying to help people with their music. You love it. You love it. And art, like anything else, you can't just wake up one morning and love it. It's not that easy. You want to appreciate music? You got to work at it. You have to study it. I can give you the name of a piece of music and say, go listen to it, and you may go listen to it and say, I don't get it. You may not. But that piece of music may be one of the 5 greatest pieces of music ever written. But I promise you, if you spend time with that piece of music, spend time with it, absorb it, your view of it will completely change. And what turns a lot of people off about art is the mistaken notion that you can just immediately appreciate it. Never does that happen. It just doesn't. You have to work at it like you do everything else. It requires work. It requires effort. When I was a young teenager, we had a 1963 Mercury meteor, and I used to go out at night, late, and I would get on the back of that car and I would just look up at the stars. It was a very important time in my life because I was contemplating God. Who is God? What does he do? I was a young believer, and I wanted to know. Psalm 8. Very, very, very important psalm in my life. I would go outside and I would look up at what my Creator had done. There was an album that came out about that time. We went from a 63 Mercury meteor to a 1965 Ford Galaxy. I don't think it was any coincidence that these 2 cars I was lying on the back of were named the Meteor and Galaxy. The Lord does have a sense of humor. But there was an album that came out in the early 70s, Don McLean, long, long time ago. I can still remember how the music used to make me smile. And I knew that if I had my chance, I could make those people dance, and maybe they would listen for a while. American Pie. I mean, people just spend hours and hours trying to analyze this song. It had some really, really cool images in it. But there was another song on that album called Vincent. Starry, starry night. Paint your palette blue and gray. Look out on a summer's day with eyes that know the darkness in my soul. Shadows on the hills, sketch the trees and the daffodils. Catch the breeze and the winter chills and colors on the snowy linen land. Now I understand what you tried to say to me. How you suffered for your sanity and how you tried to set them free. They would not listen. They did not know how. Perhaps they'll listen now. And he goes on. Starry, starry night, portraits hung in empty halls. Frameless heads on nameless walls with eyes that watch the world and can't forget. Like the strangers that you met, the ragged men in ragged clothes, the silver thorn of bloody rose lie crushed and broken on the virgin snow. Now I think I know what you tried to say to me, how you suffered for your sanity, how you tried to set them free. They would not listen. They're not listening still. Perhaps they never will. The poem was about Vincent van Gogh. Would listen to the song on the radio. I'd go get my 1960 World Book encyclopedias, which I still have that set of 1960 World Book encyclopedias. This is one of my treasures. You cannot buy them from me. They are not for sale. I looked up Van Gogh. I looked up art. And there it was, Starry Night. It's an amazing painting. But here I was on the back of those cars looking up at what my Creator had done. And here I was looking at a piece that Vincent van Gogh had created, all the turmoil that he was wrestling with in his soul. And you look at that painting, you see how the stars twist and move in the motion they have, the three dimensions of his paint. You know, Van Gogh paintings are three-dimensional. If you've ever seen one live, not a picture of it, but if you've ever seen one live, you see how he took the paint and he put it on the canvas, and it's thick. It has a texture to it. Amazing painting. I think of Rembrandt, and I have always, my entire Christian life, I've always thought much about who was responsible for the death of Christ. Me. Me. Roman soldiers, they went through the motions, but I'm the one that was responsible for him having to go and hang on that cross. Rembrandt, one of my all-time favorite paintings. Raising of the Cross, painted in 1633. And here's Rembrandt. He's showing Christ hanging on the cross. And I said last week we would look a little bit more at images of Christ. There are no images of Christ in this church. I'm glad. I do not need an image of Christ to help me worship Him. There are no pictures of Christ hanging in my house. I don't need those to help me love and adore and worship and serve Him. You want to know the details and the position that our church takes? Ask Pastor Little. He was here when this church was built. I personally don't have a problem with Rembrandt painting Christ hanging on the cross. I do not worship that. But here is Christ hanging on the cross with a look of agony on His face. And as they are raising Him up, you have at the foot of the cross the Roman soldiers who carried out the execution of the very Son of God. And who is among that group of Roman soldiers? That's a brilliant stroke of genius here. Rembrandt painted himself at the foot of the cross. Not in the attire of a Roman soldier. He had on an artist's smock and an artist's beret. Here's Rembrandt. That painting says volumes. It says volumes. It says something with a canvas and paint that I have struggled with my whole life. Rembrandt knew that he was responsible for the execution of Christ. It was his sin that put Christ on that cross. I love that painting. I love that painting. There was a certain man who felt like he could right the wrongs in the world. You had the bloody French Revolution, off with your head. It was brutal. It was brutal. This particular individual started gaining ground. People were admiring and respecting him. He's going to take care of this mess. He's the politician that's going to solve these problems for us. So this particular composer decided he was going to write a piece of music about this great man. And he did. And shortly after he wrote this piece of music, this particular individual declared himself basically dictator of the world. And this composer got so mad at this man because he looked up to him. He got so mad at this man, he just took a pen and he scratched and scratched and scratched. And the name of the man disappeared. You can look at Beethoven's original manuscript of the Eroica, the Heroic Symphony. You can see that he was so mad he just scratched out the name of Napoleon Bonaparte. Oh, it's a great piece of music. It's one of the masterpieces. But it was about this man that Beethoven thought, and many others thought, this guy's going to make things right. We do the same thing with our politicians. We think they're going to solve all these problems. Nah. Nah. But that piece of music, it's great. The Eroica Symphony. Napoleon let Beethoven down. People let us down. People let us down. Brother Lowe asked me the other day, he said, are you going to have 6 Republican politicians to be your pallbearers and to lower you in the grave? And I said, what do you mean? He said, that way everybody can say, yep, they let Brother Clyde down one more time. Significant amount of truth in there. People let us down. I let people down. I let people down. But there's somebody who doesn't let us down. And when I listen to that Eroica Symphony, I think of you have this piece of music written about this idea of a great man. It was no longer about Napoleon. And here we are in all of our greatness. We still let people down. Only Christ never, ever lets anybody down. After Hitler had gone through France and had taken over the country, there was a young composer there. And he was captured in Paris by the Nazis, and he was put in a POW camp. His name was Olivier Messiaen. I love his music. It's strange. It's bizarre. If you listen to some of it and you get it the first time, please come tell me what you did to get it the first time. It's very, very complex, very difficult music to grasp. But once you do, it's amazing. It's amazing. But here he was in this POW camp. And he was asked to write a piece of music. He was given a violin, a cello, a clarinet, and a whole raggedy upright piano. And he wrote this piece of music called Quartet for the End of Time. And Messiaen said later, "Never have I been heard with as much attention and understanding." Why? People literally thought at the beginning of World War II, this is the end of the world. This is the end of time. So Messiaen wrote this piece of music, Quartet for the End of Time. You had hundreds of prisoners there, and they play this piece of music as a concert. Stunning. Because the people in that camp, in that prisoner of war camp, knew that this was the end of time. It's here. It's coming. Listen to it. One of my all-time favorite pieces of music. Top 5, no doubt. To me, it's just the music of heaven. Paul Hindemith is the composer. The piece of music is called Symphonie Matisse der Maler, and it's about an artist, Matthias Grunwald. I can't describe it, I just need to move on. Incredible. If someone you love is dying, you want to write them a note. A Welsh poet. His father was ill. His father appeared to be dying. He didn't want his dad to die. So he could have taken a piece of paper and a pencil. He could have sat down and written, "Dear Dad, I know you're not doing well, but I really don't want you to die. Please hang on as long as you can. Love, your son." And I remember when my grandfather died. He had been in the hospital. He had cancer. And they were trying to do all these things. And he said, "Look, nothing's working. Just let me go home and die in peace." And he just, in a matter of very few days, became just basically comatose. And I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. So I took this particular poem and I wrote it out and I put it on the refrigerator. Borrowed my wife's procedure of putting pieces of art on the refrigerator with magnets. And it stayed there for a very long time. But, Dylan Thomas could have said, "Dear Dad, please don't die, hang on." But he didn't do that. He wrote in the form of a French villanelle, which is a line of a poem of 3 lines. The stanzas are 3 lines. The last stanza's 4. You have repeating lines throughout this poem. So he wrote this poem to his dad about, "Try to hang on, Dad. Try to hang on." So what he did is one of the things I love about poetry. You can write something out in a simple language and then you can turn it into a masterpiece of language, a piece of art. And that's what Dylan Thomas did with this particular poem. "Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at the end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my Father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Ah, stunning, stunning. Then he wrote another poem that I have mentioned and shared with my children. And I can tell my kids, you know, guys, you're young now, you got this energy, but time's going to work on you, you're going to get old, and then you're going to be decrepit like your father. Dylan Thomas words it in a different way. Nothing I cared in the lamb-white days that time would take me up to the swallow-thronged loft by the shadow of my hand, in the moon that is always rising, nor that riding to sleep I should hear him fly with the high fields and wake to the farm forever fled from the childless land. Oh, as I was young and easy in the mercy of his means, time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea. A couple hundred years before, number 26 in the Trinity, Isaac Watts said the same thing. Time, like an ever-rolling stream, bears all its sons away. They fly, forgotten as a dream, dies at the opening day. There's so many great poems. T.S. Eliot, Journey of the Magi. Read it. George Herbert, Redemption. Read it. Masterpieces of the English language. There are so many great works of art that I treasure. I consider them my treasures. They're in my treasure chest of things that I go to over and over and over again. And that's not to say we should make art more important than this. This is the most important thing that we have. But there are pieces of art, works of art that I love dearly, and I go to over and over and over again. I can't tell you how many times I have read Do Not Go Gentle into that good night. Hundreds. Every time I read it, if you can imagine it, I love it more and more. I listened to Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier. This was at a time when, you know, our piano, you take the octave span on that keyboard and all the intervals are the exact same. That's a fairly new thing. The first part of Bach's composing career, when he would sit down at the keyboard, you couldn't play in all keys because the intervals were tuned to specific keys. So, you know, you couldn't necessarily modulate, you just sort of needed to know what key this thing is in, and away we go. But the well-tempered tuning system came about in Bach's latter part of his life when keyboard instruments were tuned equal. The intervals were equal. There was the same distance of hertz between each interval. So it enables you to sit down and play this instrument here in any key, and it's going to work. But you listen to what Bach did with his little preludes and fugues. Genius at work. Genius at work. Please read this thing more than once. It's a dry read, but it's an incredible read because there's so much insight that Dr. Schaeffer gives us in this little book. And I hope it will inspire you to look at painting a different way. Listen to music with different ears. Read poems with different eyes. Read them and learn them and speak them out. You know, there's some great lines in the English language that we need to memorize. We need to be memorizing our scriptures. But learn some nice poems. Make them a part of you. But remember, a love and appreciation of art doesn't just happen. It doesn't. I promise you, it just doesn't. You have to work at it. You have to be involved with it. You have to study it. You have to pour yourself into it, just as the person that created it poured themselves into it. It requires discipline. It requires study. And I promise you, it's worth it. It's worth it. The time you spend studying art, whatever form of art it is, the work you put into it is worth it. And if you don't think it is, come see me. We'll talk about it. Let's pray. Father, you bless us with so much. There's so much joy and beauty that you have given to us. So many things that we can dwell on other than the sin and the ugliness that the world throws at us. Help us, Father, to embrace those things that flow from the very heart of the Scriptures. Amen.